Hi, I'm Keith McCullough, and welcome back to another Real Conversation. Today I get to have one with one of my colleagues, one of my partners. He's been at Hedgeye for 12 years, Felix, I think? Is it 12?
Almost, that's true, yeah.
12?
Long time.
That's a good long time. Good long time.
Happy to be here.
And you've grown up at Hedgeye. I mean, you started as an analyst, and now you're running your own vertical. I wanted to maybe give you a chance first. Tell people where you're from. I just told you how to pronounce his name. It's not Wang, by the way. It's Wang, right? So we're good at that.
That's true.
He does it for those of you that do subscribe to Hedgeye and have watched, whether it be the call or the macro show for that matter. Felix has a bird that he named after a company that he liked. I even pronounce it properly. I don't call his bird Pinduoduo. It's Pinduoduo.
That's right.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
So where are you from, and how'd you come up to get interested with this China research thing?
Yeah. So I was born in Shanghai. I came to the U.S. when I was 5. So and I'm pretty much a simple Chinese guy, a little bit better than average. Good looking in terms of.
Well, you got a good haircut. I like that.
No, I'm just kidding. But I went to school in PA, and I kind of got interested in the China research. I think it's a great opportunity because I think of 3 things. Because we're analysts, right? One thing is to educate people. So with Chinese stocks, most people only know about 3 names. They know Alibaba, they know Tencent, they know Baidu, otherwise known as BAT. And I call that old China. There's hundreds and hundreds of other Chinese companies. Some I can't even pronounce their names, but they're out there and they have tremendous growth potential. They have tremendous stories waiting to be told by someone who wants something new and exciting as an investor or as a trader. So I think my job, how I got interested in starting this up is, I wanted to educate people. I wanted to broaden their knowledge of Chinese culture, what, their way of life, Chinese citizens' way of life, what's hot, what's not hot among the younger people, because they're the future of China. And there's a lot of, I realized when I started to do this, there's a lot of information out there. Not only on Twitter and Weibo, which is Chinese equivalent of Twitter, but there's so much stuff that just hits my inboxes, right? A lot of those are just rumors and noise. But there's also very interesting nuggets that I try to filter out, and I write research notes based on that, and I give them to clients, institutionals, and for the China Pro sub. So one of my jobs is basically to filter out what's relevant and what's not relevant. So educate. Second thing that really got me interested in this opportunity is learning. So every week I talk to a lot of smart people. I talk to you, Keith. I talk to industry people from China who are on the ground, who are figuring out, since I can't go to China right now because of what's going on with COVID, but I have a lot of industry contacts. I talk to a lot of people who have been in the space, who understands these companies from the buy side. There's always something I may not know. Or if there's something I may know that I may not be thinking about it correctly, somebody would tell me about it. So it's a learning opportunity too, as an analyst. So I always collect a lot of feedback. And one of the tools I've developed here at Hedgeye that's been quite popular is something called Scoop and Algo, SNA for short. And part of that product is basically gleaning insights that I have from conversations with other people on specific stocks.
Well, Scoop so there's the Scoop.
That's the Scoop part. Yeah,
exactly. And then there's the Algo, which is purely data driven, which is Hedgeye style as well.
Exactly. So that gets to my last point on why this opportunity was really interesting, is because when I was under the mentorship of Todd and Anna back in the Hedgeye days, one of the things I learned was you got to have something value add, right? But it's not enough just to be different. Everybody can be different. They can have a different data set here and there. You have to have something that has shown to have predictive power or to be right? Yep. You got to be different and right. So you have to have both combinations. So this is why I've created a lot of proprietary data sets, databases, to try to give myself and also to try to give investors and traders the best opportunity to be right on a theme or on a stock. So, the value add part is where I thought it was really interesting, and I think that's where I can add value.
Yeah,
if you will.
I mean, and we'll get into that. I mean, I found it amazing that of the three stocks that you just mentioned that everybody seems to know, the first one, Alibaba, it was really interesting that right out of the box, you're like, well, this data is decelerating. And the hedge fund community at the time, for those of you that missed that call, was very long of Alibaba. And it wasn't inconsequential people in the hedge fund, on the hedge fund side, both domestically and abroad. And I was like, wow, he's really just staying true to that. He met Todd Jordan. So Felix grew up working with Todd Jordan. And again, it's very similar in process, but it's entirely different in subject matter. I talk about learning, when you get on the call in the morning, all I'm doing is learning. I mean, I'm either learning how to pronounce the bloody name of the company, let's just start with that, or then if I'm lucky enough, I'll understand what you're actually talking about in terms of what the company does and being able to contextualize it within my signal. My signal can read anything, right? It doesn't matter. It could be Japanese, Chinese, it could be whatever it is. So I know what to do with the signal, but I really have to lean on you more than most of our analysts because the subject matter is just so foreign to me.
And it's all about also the context, right? Because when again, there's a lot of noise out there.
Tons.
You got to get the right information, the right context, and the right understanding of what's going on with a particular company. Alibaba is huge. Appreciate you calling me out on that because I think at that time people were thinking the stock was under pressure just because of what's going on with COVID, but actually it was more with competition. Mm-hmm. A guy named Pinduoduo came along and literally transformed, disrupted the whole e-commerce industry last year. And fortunately enough, that was our biggest winner.
Yeah.
Actually, it was the biggest winner in China internet that year. So
that's why he named his bird.
That's why I named my bird there.
But
couldn't be here today.
To be on the right side of both of them. I mean, I'll remember this. One of the biggest money managers in Boston. He's like, well, if you guys are bullish on China because China was in Quad 1, what do you like? And I'm like, at the time, I think I was probably mispronouncing PDD, but he said, oh, I think I'm the only guy here at this firm that owns it, which means that's probably going to change. And that did change, and that changed materially. But to get those right, and let's maybe just get into your process, to get those right, correct me if I'm wrong, was a measuring and mapping exercise using data.
There was a lot of data that we used. So one of the tools that I heavily rely on is called my GMV database, and GMV is gross merchandise value.
Yep.
And so at that time when I was making the call, kind of like a pair trade short Baba long PDD, I was noticing that the growth rate for some of the products that Baba was very, more exposed to, like clothing and things of that nature, that was slowing down big time. COVID did play an impact there. While other categories like nuts and fruits and vegetables and other kinds of food-related items that Pinduoduo is more exposed towards, it was growing.
Yeah.
It was growing. So there was like a dichotomy there in my proprietary data. But then I was thinking more bigger picture, which is this whole concept of social e-commerce. So people going out there and getting recommendation links from their friends. Pinduoduo basically ping them and say, hey, buy this vegetable, buy this tomato, on sale. Meanwhile, if you buy it with two other friends, you get an even bigger discount,
Yeah.
But at that time, they were very, very reliant on that WeChat ecosystem that's owned by Tencent. So it was very easy to build what I call the social e-commerce network. And they were very early on. That's why Pinduoduo, last year, they were kind of very disruptive to the whole model, right? Because at that time with Alibaba, Taobao, Tmall, it was very traditional e-commerce selling. There wasn't too much of what we call group buying. There wasn't a lot of, friends getting involved in a whole network when you buy a product. It was much more merchandise-centric versus Pinduoduo is more consumer-centric, right? You get on there, you're not sure what you want to buy, but then you get all these recommendations from your friends. You're like, oh, maybe I need that.
That's interesting. That's like because you're to your point. If you don't have edge, you're not going to. People aren't going to pay you. So the measuring and mapping the data centricity to your product, your ability to contextualize it for basically illiterate people like me when it comes to anything on China, and I mean not macro, I mean anything bottom up. But culturally, like how big a difference is it, and how much time do you have to spend when you're speaking to U.S. centric investors that are trading or investing in Chinese stocks? That difference, because what you just said, just using that very basic example, I mean culturally that's different.
Yes. Chinese culture is very different, and I'm lucky enough to marry a Chinese wife, so she, has helped me, actually, in countless ways. That she's kind of behind the scenes.
Is she, if you don't mind me asking this, because I think I know the answer, but you're born Chinese, raised American. Is she the same?
She was actually the other way around. She was born in Guam, which is a U.S. territory.
Okay.
But she was raised in China.
I should know this, so that she helps you with that.
Absolutely,
like, hey,
yeah.
Dumbass, this is the way it is.
Actually, she actually may use that exact terminology when she addresses me.
But do you spend a lot of time with U.S. investors, like where somebody, again, use me as an example. The questions I ask you, sometimes you must be thinking, okay, how do I not just like say, come on, man, like you got to know this?
Because it's very, like there are things in that Chinese citizens value more, or it's like they have a different type of lifestyle than here in the U.S. When I first started this business model, one of the companies I kept talking about was Huya and Douyu and YY with live streaming. This is a concept that in the U.S. still hasn't really gotten popular because people don't understand it. Why are you pitching me products and singing at the same time? I'm supposed to tip you. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, people. I remember the first time you pitched YY on the short side, and a couple, again, U.S., American, Canadian or American hedge fund managers would say, "Oh, that's a soft porn site."
Yeah,
like, what?
It is.
Like we're writing research about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, but that was the umbrella. There's a one-liner for everything, but it's like they try to put it in the U.S. box, and it's not.
It's different. I think it's just a different kind of interest and mentality. And one of the things why the so-called soft porn thing had really taken off is because you have to think about from what we call lower tier cities. So people who are more unfortunate, like disadvantaged in terms of career paths. They're more lower income, slower pace of life, so to speak. Well, they get bored, and they're very sometimes they get very lonely. Right? And they need connections. They need social connections. One thing China has done really, really well and has been a pioneer of, which is social networking.
Yes.
Social network, right? And I think when Tencent started, they had some inspirations from what Facebook was able to accomplish. But now it's enormous. You have 1.2 billion people on a monthly average user, 1.1 billion on daily average user using an app called WeChat. It's basically the #1 social app in the world now. I mean, other than maybe Facebook, but it's enormous. Everybody has a mobile device, so mobile penetration is almost, hit the top. But it's just everybody has to be connected to a network. So back to my point on live streaming, some people are lonely and they want companionship, right? I'm very serious.
I got that part.
And that's how live streaming was able to boom, a few years ago, just because it gives them an avenue of escape to kind of have a virtual friend, so to speak. So when you watch your favorite actor or host, so to speak, and you enjoy what they do, or what they promote, you tip them. So nowadays, it's still, unbelievably, it's still a big revenue model for many firms out there in China. So a lot of people don't know about this kind of concept. I think it's again culturally different.
Yeah, it's
in
there are
China.
so many interesting components to all this. Now, how about we get into a couple slides where you can show your process so people can get a good visual on what this looks like.
Okay, great. So if we could go to one of the slides here. So
you're using a Sierpinski gasket
yes,
there, buddy.
And I got it off of you, Keith.
For those of you that don't know what that is, that's a fractal pattern or Sierpinski gasket. So if Felix were to have, and you have more triangles in yours than I do, but if you were to blow that out, and not blow it up, but you just can. That's the whole point about similar sets. You have more and more parts that reinforce the entirety of the part or of the pattern.
Yes, everything is connected, and basically each of these triangles. When I explain this slide to other people, they're kind of different from a traditional research firm, so sell side or buy side actually. So what I try to do is, I'm very data oriented. I have very important contacts that I talk to on a weekly basis in a lot of different ecosystems in China. And all these ecosystems are actually, one other thing I forgot to mention, all these ecosystems are very related to each other. So when you cover China, one of the interesting things about this is you have to cover all the industries, because you have a player like Alibaba or Tencent, they have a tentacle in every field. Even electric vehicles, they want to be involved. Cars, social media, education, fintech. There's just so many different ecosystems you have to cover. It's very unique from that perspective.
Well, it forces interconnectedness. I mean, that's how I do macro, because the world is on a nonlinear basis ultimately interconnected. So that's why we use that pattern, the same pattern in the macro breakdown. That's interesting.
Right, and so all these triangles, if we could go back to that slide, are very interconnected in order to try to give you guys, investors, traders out there, the best chance to be right. I think that's very important. So if we go to the next slide, so I have a lot of tools that I mentioned before. Tools are very important to me because they give me kind of a forward-looking indicator on specific KPI for many different ecosystems. So for example, pan-entertainment, e-commerce, and then on the next slide, fintech, education, and then a couple other databases here and there. And then I'm going to talk more about auto in the next few weeks. But again, these tools are extremely important because first of all, I don't think many people, other research shops utilize them. They usually just talk to management and see, hey, what's going on, buddy? Not to really, file them, but basically.
I can't believe you said something negative about the old wall. No, I mean, it's like but you keep our software and engineering team. A lot of people don't know that we have this team, but we have a huge team at Hedgeye here. There are almost 80 people now. And our software engineering and data science team, I mean, you keep them very busy. So when you're talking about tools, these aren't like, a wrench and a hammer.
And exactly, and our operations team, hats off to them in helping me out in terms of mapping this out, getting the data sources, and basically piecing it together so it would be easier for me to read. And they've done a ton of work. So I want to give them hats off there. It's a huge team effort. For example, the GMV database I mentioned earlier, it's humongous. We're talking about billions and billions of data points. So I don't know, Excel can't hold it. Sometimes you have to have multiple files. Yep. So it's a very intricate type of database, but it's been very powerful and it's worked. That's most important.
It was smarter than some hedge fund managers. Imagine that. It got Alibaba down and PDD up. It was the data. Yeah,
and the data actually now,
it's getting better.
It's getting a little bit better, only for Baba though. Yeah. So that's the caveat.
That threw me for a loop when you said that last week.
Yeah.
I was like, only for Baba.
Only for Baba.
So I can still short JD.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. So.
And what you're also going to find with Felix is that he gives yes or no answers, and it's not even yes anymore. It's just absolutely.
Maybe I should temper my enthusiasm a little bit. But if we could go back to the slide, so if we could continue with our process, if we could go to the next slide. So one of the key products.
This is awesome.
Yes.
This has made it easier for me, by the way. It's made it easier for me to consume your edges every day. Because when you have to write it every day and you got to keep it tight, that's better than me asking you about it every day. Because I also ask you about it on the call. So I get both, but I get the tickers. So I take your tickers and I put them in my system, then I have something more tangible to talk about.
Great, I'm happy it helps with the process because the purpose of this note is, I can't go on the call and talk
Talk
30
about
minutes.
every single one.
Yeah, it's
Right.
just too much.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is I try to compress it and be very succinct in kind of a Twitter kind of fashion on tickers and themes that is relevant for today. For
Yep.
example, today there was some talk on regulation, particularly also impacting Huya, which is a game live streaming app. So I put that in the negative camp. So there's a positive kind of category and there's a negative kind of category. So the purpose of this product is to give you an idea of what could potentially, investors be thinking about today for that particular ticker.
And I find with your world, it's like as opposed to, I shouldn't say this. I mean, it is a little faster than like gaming, lodging, and leisure, like what you used to work on.
Yeah,
People react very quickly to Chinese data points.
Volatility has picked up big time. Yes, some moves in Chinese equities you usually see across years happens in 1 week. It's incredible what's happening.
I think that's because of quad 3.
Quad 3, I gotta hand it to you, Keith. Like, it's incredible call. I mean, China has underperformed this year, so you have to be very, very, very selective on terms of companies to invest in. The other thing is regulation.
Yep.
And
Big
this
time.
year, that's the R word. Regulation has been a key catalyst or a key headwind
Guys,
for
just
Chinese stocks.
on the first one, just so that people know, and we backtest everything at Hedgeye, every exposure, every market, 50 different countries, but China is one of the biggest ones. Slide 21, guys, you can see the China nowcast model, and then on slide 22, you can see really the stench that is quad 3. So it's the only quad. I mean, quad 4 isn't even as bad. It's one of the few countries where quad 4 isn't like the death. Quad 3 is. And what we're showing there is China consumer stocks. So when I saw Bill Huang blow up, I mean, it's like you're levering up into quad 3. That is not when you do that. You got to be taking down your gross exposure, Bill, tightening your net. Now, he didn't ask me. If he did, it would help.
I don't think he asked anybody.
No, but actually, he may have not asked the prime broker either. But we're kidding, though. In all good fun. Anyway, but it is interesting to see China is what we thought it was from an exposure perspective. Stagflation in the Chinese economy is public enemy number one, economically.
It's been, and you have been absolutely right. Growth is slowing, and pork prices are like that. So I keep an eye on the pork prices. It's been an indicator of inflation. I'm not expert like you on inflation, but
I'm a big time expert on pork prices. Did you know what the Z score is for lean hog positioning in CFTC futures and options contract?
No, I don't
I
know.
do,
Is it?
but it doesn't. I don't think it's going to help me today. But I know it. Right? But hogs, pork's a big one. Did I obviously interrupted you, but did you have another process slide that you wanted to finish?
No, I was just going to finish up with the trader's diary. So
right.
if we could go to the last slide.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, good.
So basically, this slide is important because one of the key tenets of Hedgeye is transparency.
Yeah.
And I learned that from what you do, Keith. And I try to be as transparent as well. So with people who subscribe to China Pro, you'll be able to see everything that I put in for this product and other products real time and also, in review. So nothing to hide. We're fully transparent. So far, it's been pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
In a down China market, man.
It's been pretty good.
People China's been like a modern day Beirut. This thing's been bombed every other day, and it's getting bombed again today. You've had a lot of success on the long side actually in a down market.
I think I've been very fortunate to avoid blow-ups. For example, the Bill Huang blow-up.
Yeah.
One of the tickers he blew up on was Tencent Music. We took that off our long list the day before he blew up. So that wasn't by some miracle. That was just really good luck.
Did your wife call his sister or something? Did you get a little?
I don't know. He must have checked my Twitter. Said, who is this Felix Wang guy? Yeah, doesn't took off TME. But
when you go negative on stuff too, I mean these education stocks, they were great shorts. I think Billy looks like a great short right now. Maybe.
Yeah, Billy's. We call it a tactical short because I still like the longer term. The Gen Z people have a love for Billy. They have a very unique type of UI. When you open up their app, they're very sticky business. But Billy's expectations are now through the roof. People know about this company. It's a $40 billion company now.
That's huge.
Last year, it was like $5 to $6 billion. So that was the opportunity last year when we liked it. Now everybody likes it.
Can you explain Bilibili? Because I'm guessing people would like an explanation.
Sure. I'll try to be succinct here. So Bilibili started its roots as more of like an anime kind of company. That's where people, their fans, really associated with Bilibili. But now they've kind of broken out of that circle and try to become much more of a huge, I call them entertainment platform. They now are doing many different things other than just anime. They've really broadened out their content library. They've also kind of diversified the type of creators on their platform. It's not just professional creators anymore. You have user-generated creators like those that you see on YouTube, for example. That's why Bilibili often is associated with YouTube, because that's kind of a very close comparison. But from a monetization perspective, Bilibili is very different from YouTube. Right now, Bilibili is not that wholly reliant on advertising yet. They're still trying to build their live streaming business, their e-commerce business, and more importantly, the mobile games revenue was the one that was the biggest component of that business in the last few years. So they've been trying to diversify across all kinds of ecosystems. But they're the go-to entertainment platform now for young people. Why? Because it's kind of hip. If you go to their website, it's very bubbly, happy. It's not like very business-like type of websites that I see on in a lot of different China websites. So they try to create a very optimistic kind of feel. They have great relationships with the young fans. They even make you take a 100-question test if you want to become a Bilibili member. And how that works is, I thought that was interesting because I was like, why are they doing this? They just want to make sure that you're a loyal Bilibili user. You're not just someone who doesn't deserve to be part of that community. So that kind of builds up that, how do I say it, like community engagement, right? Community affiliation. So that was a great thing that they did. It was a great marketing tactic.
Took you from 4 billion to 40 billion in market cap. Sounds pretty happy.
Yeah. But now it's a different animal, right? Now everybody knows about it. So one of the things on my Billy Short was that, look, one of the growth angles that they've been trying to develop for at least a couple of years now is live streaming. Going back to that soft porn business, right? So
soft porn campaign back in this. Okay.
My data, my proprietary data, shows expectations are high on that segment, and I think they may underperform when they report earnings on that segment, right? I'm not saying they're going to miss estimates, but what I'm saying is where buy side is, which is a lot higher than where sell side is from my conversations with my clients, they may be disappointed when Billy reports earnings just because live streaming may not be that strong.
And that's the growth engine for the company.
That's one of the growth engines.
Of the big ones, yeah.
But my point on this is, if anything kind of underperforms expectations, for a hot stock like Bilibili, hot growth stock like Bilibili, you could see a pretty steep decline.
I mean, this thing. When I look at this, the run, like you said, we talked about it in market cap, but I remember when you mentioned this to me when you liked it. I think it was obviously a lot lower, but this thing's coming from the stratosphere, and it's interesting. Bilibili peaked right when Quad 1 in China peaked. Yeah, China peaked. The data started to roll in March. Bilibili peaked in February of this year, at $160. I mean, it's at 108, but it was at 20, not like only 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely transformed itself.
Yeah.
But expectations are expectations.
Yeah.
And I think they're too high right now. Compared with another company that I've been pitching a lot on the long side, it's my top pick right now, which is Zhihu. The ticker is ZH. They want to be.
Can you say that again? Zhihu?
Zhihu is the ticker is ZH. And
see, I still, no matter how many times you pronounce it, I can't pronounce it. But I'm gonna keep trying and see.
I'm gonna try to tell management to have an English name for their company so that more people can. No, I'm kidding. But
this has been good. This is a relatively new issue, right?
It IPO'd earlier this year. and it was an underperforming IPO because it was IPOing during a time where regulation was just starting to pick up. So that was a perfect time.
They IPO'd on their New York Stock Exchange listed, but they're Chinese or what?
They're listed in the U.S.
Oh, so they did
US
the Didi
ADR.
Didi thing, but they didn't get Didi Didi.
They didn't get Didi Didi. No, that was before. So they were fortunate when they IPO. Regulation hasn't really like gained steam yet. They were kind of in the, I would say, the second or third inning.
Could they re-regulate the poor thing?
Well, that's one thing why I like about this company right now is they're insulated as far as I know. Okay. Not all the way. So there's something called the National Film Society. You know, a lot of those institutions that may have regulatory bodies, they're looking at whether there may be inappropriate content on these so-called entertainment platforms, knowledge-based platforms, but they're small. They're not a big regulator that's after everybody right now, like the SAMAR, State Administration of Market Regulation, CAC, that's the Cyberspace Association of China, I believe. That went after Didi. Those are big guys, big regulators going after them. ZH, there's nothing to regulate on them. They're so small. They're only a $4 to $5 billion or $6 billion market cap. They're very small right now. What are you going to regulate on? Anti-monopoly? Well, there's nothing like tangible where they have done anything wrong yet. They're not big enough where they're in the spotlight for the government to be worried. So I feel like it's more of an insulated trade. And right now, with Quad 3, with regulation, new regulation, headwinds every single day, I think some investors, are staying away from China. But I see, like a company like ZH would actually get an additional boost because they're just more of a hedge against everything else that's going on in China.
What do they do specifically?
So they're like a combination of Reddit and Quora together.
What's Quora?
So Quora is if you have a question about, what do Chinese people like to watch during the evening times, you go to Quora.
Soft porn.
Soft porn, maybe. Yeah. Or what do Americans, like to watch during the evening times? What is hot these days among young consumers? It's a question and answer type of platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a combo of Reddit and Quora. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But they want to be the next Bilibili. So that, that's how I tie in Bilibili.
And there's a massive market cap difference.
Yes.
So you could be long one, short the other, and that's what.
Exactly.
Do you find? First of all, our hedge fund clients, without naming names, like are they pretty much paired off with most Chinese names, or are they generally net long?
I would say right now there's a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And I understand that because you don't know how bad this regulation thing can get.
I mean, yeah, I fear OPEC right now. Like I got my ass handed to me in energy the last 2 days. Never mind waking up to what China could do every day.
But fear breeds opportunity.
Yeah.
And volatility can go both ways.
Big time.
And regulation is not permanent. So to me, this is a temporary soft patch. China has transformed itself a lot in the past decade, right? So this is kind of an adjustment period. But there's still a lot of great companies out there with, I call them futuristic kind of appeal, new China, so to speak, that you have to be investors into because there's nothing else like it in the world.
One of my good friends, Brendan Ahern, who I think you know.
Oh, of course.
Brendan runs Crane Shares. So they have KWeb, they have KBA, they have a bunch of Chinese ETFs. He says the exact same thing. And you two, from what I could tell, are the only two people that aren't full of shit on the topic of China that I generally speak to. So I'm going to be on board with that. The other thing that I'm on board with is, and you've done it again, is that somehow amidst like flat out carnage in Chinese factor exposure, beta, and in the U.S. equity market broadly, ZH is up today. And it's been up. It doesn't go down. Like it's not. It went down a little bit, but in the last week, think of what's happened. In particular, Hong Kong got blasted again last night.
Yeah.
The Hong Kong listed names. This thing has actually gone up, which is interesting.
I think it could be a hedge, and then plus, it's very early in its monetization strategy. If you want to try to become, they're right now a very, very small Bilibili. If you want to become a bigger Bilibili, you got to ramp up, and that's what they're doing right now.
Is this, if you have a hunting bias, Is that what you look for? Because Pinduoduo was kind of the same thing. People didn't understand it, and then they just became what you thought they were going to become.
PDD has changed. CEO,
Yeah, now it has.
CEO has left.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not bullish on that one anymore.
If you're asking me to name my second bird, CH,
ZH?
or Zhihu, or I mean maybe just CH, to be determined.
You might be getting that bird keeps acting up on the call. You might be replacing
It's
him.
getting bigger. It's getting more screechier.
Yeah.
So no, I would never replace him. I mean, come on. He has a soft heart.
How many years did those bloody birds last?
5 years, I think.
I'm not trying to be inhumane. I just, I know where you live. All right. Before we take other people's questions, which are going to be better than mine, because there's some and we have found this. Actually, here's a question for you. And I asked you this on the call, but I thought it was an important answer. You said when you presented China Pro for the first time. China Pro, by the way, is basically like all of our pro products. You can now get Hedgeye's mission to democratize the world's best research that we sell to hedge funds, as I mentioned, pension funds, mutual funds, et cetera, at a more reasonable price for you, and you get to know what they know when they know. Okay, so that's important. So when you kind of go through this, Felix, I think it was the first time that you opened it up for a live QA to the people, and that's what I love. I love it when all of you have the opportunity to call in and ask Felix. You have every right to ask equally as good or a better question than somebody who's sitting in the ivory tower, okay? And you said that there were some damn good questions that you got, and you're used to only getting institutional questions. So what was that like in terms of the difference? I mean, was there a difference? It doesn't have to be different.
I didn't see any difference. I think it was like because the pro product is a little bit different than what we present to.
The product itself is different.
Exactly.
And you have institutions on it, by the way.
We do.
Yeah.
But I think, the type of content, the type of questions they laid out was very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I think I'm going to do more and more of these Q&A calls.
Yeah.
I think it's important, going back to my, why I decided to do this, it's so important to collect feedback.
Yeah.
It's always someone who's smarter than me. So I want to know what that guy is thinking, And for the pro subs, this is your opportunity to ask me anything. So I'm gonna learn as you're learning, hopefully from my product. So there are always ways to make it better.
Yeah, Brian McGough says this all the time. He's one of the best stock pickers ever at Hedgeye, and he's like the arena. He loves the arena too, because the arena is where our power users are back and forth with each other, debating each other. Like everyone wants to save money and make money. That's the goal, right? Yep. But he says that he gets a lot of new ideas from his pro subscriber base. So I look forward to seeing what they come to with.
That's great.
That's awesome. Before I take the first question in the queue, you've mentioned like your best long. I didn't mean to force Billy in as a best short. It's more of a tactical short. What other ideas you
got? So right now, I'm actually more positive on Baba.
Yeah.
I think it's for the first time.
I'm laughing because he sent this note out on.
I don't know. I've never said I'm positive on Baba. I don't think I've ever. Maybe once, but
I was like, what? Did this note? Because I get the internal note comes through, and I'm like, really? That's good.
So I'm doing actually a deep dive presentation on Baba and Tencent. So the reason why I went long in a very short, small nutshell reason is because of this potential partnership with Tencent. So I think there's a lot of moving parts with that, and there's a lot of rumors out there. Again, rumors.
It'd be a huge partnership.
It will be a huge partnership between two giants. What I will argue on my call on Wednesday in my deep dive is Baba has to have this partnership. If they don't get this partnership, I think they go back to their same old Baba. All those long-term issues I've talked about for so long. But this could be a tremendous game changer for them. It's going to be a win-win partnership, but to me, Alibaba will be an even bigger winner than Tencent because Baba needs Tencent more than Tencent needs Baba. So this is something that I'm going to go in more in depth on. I
think the Alibaba bulls need Felix Wang in their corners. What they need. This thing's got.
They have plenty of bulls. I think I'm one of the last bears out there.
Well, it went from 320 to 200. Okay, to be clear. So that was just a world-class call. All right, you ready for some of their questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Jim and some of these questions, Felix, will, by nature, people will ask some top-down questions because they know that, obviously I have my macro opinions. But I'm going to ask you after they ask me anyway. Jim in California, is America decoupling with China? 500 Chinese students were denied U.S. student visas, Taiwan issue, potentially new nukes in China, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have an opinion on that?
Right now, all I say is the U.S. and China are not really friends. The way I always think about this is like it's just two superpowers, right? It's like maybe a hockey game, the championship game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trash talking going on. Everybody's getting hyped. Everyone's trying to find ways to defeat the other team. Bring on the right players,
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what's going on right now. But at the end of the game, at the end of the day, they're still at the championship game.
Yeah.
They didn't get eliminated in the qualifying rounds, right?
Yeah.
So everybody knows that China and the U.S. are the two biggest superpowers right now in the world, and there's always going to be a lot of disagreements and bickering because each of them is looking at, further out, 5 to 10 years out, how big of a threat or how big of a foe they could be in many, many different areas. So unfortunately, a lot of people thought when President Trump left and now with President Biden in the administration, relationships should thaw and get more warmer. That hasn't happened yet, right? The tariffs, but 2 years ago it was all about tariffs. Mm-hmm. Now tariffs doesn't really get into the discussion anymore. Now it's more regulation, delisting. So to his question, yes, they're also denying visas to a lot of international students. Although I think President Biden did say he was going to get away from that and be more open with allowing more international students to get visas to study here in the U.S. I think don't quote me on that, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be U.S.-China tensions. But I also think everybody knows about this by now. It's like, how much worse can it really get?
Yeah, I think people definitely get triggered on that. I mean, they have political thoughts on it. There's also Thucydides' trap, it's a well-documented, history of the world where you have rising power against existing superpower. You get all these rubs, and people think it's going to go a different. What I love about your research is that you don't really quite get. That's not going to affect your view or your process on names.
I try to be as apolitical as possible.
Yeah, you have to be. I mean, you got to understand political risks, but to say, hey, look, I can't touch anything here because I have some political view, that's tough. That's never going to fly here. Michael, question for Michael. Felix, what duration are most of your ideas looking at? And then he goes on to say, given quad 3 stagflation, the overall short China call for the macro team, are you looking for relative outperformance over the next couple of quarters, or are these actual long-term plays that we can buy the damn dip in? That's a very good question, Michael.
That is a great question. That's a great question. I think it's both ways. I mean, that's why I created a trading product for more short-term oriented ideas, but I also have a position monitor for more of the longer-term ideas. I interact with institutional traders, institutional clients. So it depends. Right now, China is in a tough spot. Again, but I also say fear breeds opportunity. I would pair trade a lot right now before, until the dust settles. There's a lot of pair trading ideas right now in China. I think, I've picked out a couple.
Yeah, pair trade. I mean, your ideas, though, generally speaking, irrespective of the quad, are intermediate to long term. Like when you look at PDD or it sounds like ZH is an intermediate to long-term idea.
Yes.
You're just saying use the quad to pair it off. What I love, Michael, about this question is that you're integrating the whole Hedgeye process. Like Felix and I talk all about this all the time, okay? And you asked the question beautifully using the different durations, trades, trends, and tails, right? So
exactly.
That's important. All right, Dave in California. Felix, what's the financial mainstream media missing on China's story and Chinese equities right now? And away from, let's just put it, Dave, the mainstream media does not talk about the quads. So they're not all over quad 3. Let's just get that on the table. They're probably talking a lot about variance. They're probably talking a lot about regulation. They're talking about a lot of USA versus China, as you mentioned. But is there anything specifically out there that they have that you hear all the time that they have dead wrong when it comes to the stocks?
So they don't talk about any of the smaller stocks. Again, they only talk about Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu, maybe a little bit of JD and ByteDance.
They do that's why when the guy off what the hell is that part of CNBC? He's a good guy, but he was calling it Pinduoduo. I mean, they don't know what the names of the freaking companies are. Let's start with that. So they missed the whole underneath the
exactly
the top market caps.
And that's why we're here. I have hundreds and hundreds of stocks to go through. There's always going to be some kind of opportunity.
How many stocks do you have in your universe?
I mean, in my complete coverage universe, probably about 100.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten to covering all of them. It's just a lot of companies to go towards.
On that list, guys, go back to his long, short,
Well, there's a China coverage
you have that?
slide. Yes, it should be in there somewhere if we can bring that up. But again, China is all about ecosystems, right? There's entertainment, life services, e-commerce, education, autos, industrial software, anything. I mean, there's a lot of ecosystems out there. So I'm looking forward to covering most or all of them. But to my point here in answering the question, what are financial media missing? I think they're missing out that not everything is going down, first of all, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
There's always opportunity somewhere, right? So that's why I decided to take on this opportunity with China Pro and Hedgeye China, because I feel like there's a lot that the media doesn't really don't know about. Last year it was Pinduoduo. Who mentioned Pinduoduo last year? Nobody. Almost nobody. Bilibili. These are foreign names, right? Now everybody starts talking about them. So my job is try to find that hidden gem before everyone starts talking about them, before they become to be a giant.
Well, how about on the? Here's another way to ask that question, the same question, a different way. On the Didi IPO, what were they missing? Like you're in this position of knowledge, and you're watching people talk about something, and a lot of them don't know what they're talking about at all.
Yeah, I can't comment too much on Didi because I'm still doing work on it. I think Didi, was very, how should I say it? They were pretty adamant that they wanted to list in the U.S. From people I talked to, and now people are saying, well, they may have, jumped the gun a little bit and not really pleased the regulators on what they wanted to check out from Didi before they listed. So they need to be careful with that because there could be a lot of lawsuits. But my impression of what people are missing from Didi is competition. So no one talks about who Didi is up against. So Didi has so-called 90% of the ride-sharing market. That's what everybody quotes on CNBC and all these media. But they don't understand who's part of that 10%.
Right.
And were they always at 90%? How about I tell you they were at around 95 to 96% maybe 2 years ago. So is that necessarily a good thing, right? That they're cutting their share. Reminds me of Alibaba's golden age, right? When they had literally no competition except JD. All of a sudden, Pinduoduo comes along and messes things up. Now they have to worry about them, right? So Didi is not immune to competition, contrary to what a lot of people say. The other thing people are missing on Didi is international opportunity. So not many people talk about Didi outside of the U.S. because international opportunity is still pretty small when you look at their financial statements. But this is a huge growth driver for them in the longer term. And then auto taxis, robot taxi drivers. We laugh about it, right? It's just a dream. It's just an idea. But that's something that people will get excited about when they talk about ride hailing. I mean, I know here we've been negative on Uber. We've been negative on Lyft. So I guess people are waiting for me to be negative on Didi. That's kind of the trend. So I feel like there's pulls and pushes and pulls. I don't know if that's the right saying here, but like Didi is a very complex company, just like Alibaba. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
Financial media only talks about one certain part of the company.
Because it's the part they understand. Yeah.
Perhaps, yes.
Maybe.
But our job here at Hedgeye is we're trying to give you the whole picture. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Big time. On that whole picture, I love this question because I get it. This is Dave from Connecticut. What are some of the pros and cons of managing a Chinese vertical from Connecticut?
That's interesting. So the pro of managing a China vertical from Connecticut is I'm in the same time zone as when the U.S. stocks trade.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge advantage for me. So when something happens like today, in the U.S. markets, people in Asia are sleeping, and I get the news feed first, right? So I know what's going on. I can put out a note to clients and figure out, oh, why is Billy, up or down 5% today?
Yeah.
Something came out while the stock is trading.
Yeah, like
Right.
last week, Billy's website went down.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I put out like a real-time notification on that Billy's server crashed. That was actually a big thing because from a PR perspective, they did not handle that well. Who benefits from that? Zhihu, because
go.
some live streamers may go over and partner
Look, and
with
Billy
them.
went down and ZH went up.
So that was one thing. But so that's a pro. The con is, well, all the Chinese companies, none of them are in Connecticut, unfortunately. They're headquartered in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou. So, at some point, I hope to go over to China more often when these trade, travel restrictions kind of lift. But that's the con, is being more connected over there. This is why connections are so important. So I have a lot of industry people who are in China right now, who I talked to when I was visiting China before COVID hit, who I still talk to today. They're important because they're there. They know what's going on. They've talked to their contacts. You have to have that when you're in Connecticut. Otherwise, you're like in a black box, right?
And if you were in Shanghai trying to do it and you couldn't speak English, you would have an even bigger problem.
Exactly.
But I think that's a good question. It's a very interesting answer. I mean, just the real-time nature of it all. I didn't think about that. But I get that question too. It's like, how can you do global macro if you're not in all these places? Well, that's not how you do global macro. You start with rate of change data, and rate of change data is universal now. And a lot of the things that Felix talked about, by the way, are how we run our predictive tracking algos, all the big data and macro. I couldn't have done that. Like, if you go back to 12 years ago when you started in New Haven, Connecticut as an analyst, the tools and the computing power alone that we have today, would it or would it not make it possible for Felix Wang to run the China research business the way that you're doing it?
It'll be a lot harder.
Way harder.
Way harder.
You couldn't do real time, with billions of data points incoming. You just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it's a brave new world. It's for, I always say this game is not for old crusty men that just don't want to evolve, or women for that matter, obviously.
I'll just add a quick answer to that question too, is that there's a lot of people who are still interested in China equities here in the U.S., but they don't have coverage.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the other benefit of us being U.S. What are the advantages of running a China vertical in Connecticut? There are people in Connecticut that care about Chinese stocks. Actually, I talked to my dentist yesterday. She was telling me, why is Alibaba going down? So, I mean, look, that's just an example. Like somewhere, there's always going to be people who are interested in stocks from different types of markets, right? And we're here in Connecticut. Our job is to educate, to let them know what's going on in China and help them make a more informed decision.
Here's a good question from Jeff in Connecticut. We only have a couple more minutes left here for these, Felix. Felix, can you speak to the dynamics of U.S. listed companies operating in China and their ability to work through these internal political changes that are happening?
Yes. So one of the things that was kind of a popular way for U.S. companies for Chinese companies to list in the U.S. Was this something called VIE, variable interest entities. So it was basically a way for Chinese companies to circumvent the rule that foreign investors can't surpass a certain cap on that of ownership on a Chinese company. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they introduced these VIE entities, and it's a very complicated accounting framework that allows them to list offshore so that foreign investors could invest in these companies. Well, now the regulators is kind of they're not closing it, but they're more monitoring this type of accounting framework on how Chinese companies get listed in the U.S. So that's a negative. I'm not sure how the implications of that going forward for upcoming IPOs, but I think there are new ways to kind of get around that. At the end of the day, it's about conforming to the different frameworks, right? I still believe delisting is a very, very extremely small risk. I do believe the accounting bodies from China and the accounting bodies from the U.S. will get together and create a more comprehensive framework. So, there's always going to be headwinds. There's always going to be regulatory headwinds or political headwinds. But at the end of the day, I think people will realize the best way forward is to be more and more cooperation.
Yeah, your answers on that, you've said it more than a couple times at this point. They're different than what people are used to seeing on Twitter. Twitter, they get polarization. Twitter, they get one or the other. They get the cancel culture, everything else. And you're like, kind of what superpowers do. Coming together makes more sense. It doesn't always have to be the end of the world. And on China, plenty of people talk about it. Maybe last question. This is back to stocks. Are companies? This is from Jupiter, Florida. This is an interesting question. Are companies like Alibaba and Tencent popular in other Asian countries? And they list like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand.
That's a great question. So I'm guessing when the person asking this, in terms of popular, are you talking about popular products or are you talking about popular as a stock? Because that's two different things.
Yeah,
but
I go with products.
Products. So Alibaba is a global company. They have a tremendous department called Tmall Global. The tentacles. They've basically broadened their global outreach to so many different countries now. Why? All about pricing. So if you want to buy something cheap, Tmall Global probably has an option for you that's cheaper than your local source. And plus, Alibaba has a wealth of data that if you're a merchant and if you're a consumer who wants to do business with Alibaba, you have access to.
Yeah.
Particularly for a Chinese consumer. Think about the Chinese consumer. They not only buy stuff from China, they want to buy stuff from France, Europe, all these luxury particular items. You gotta have that kind of opportunity. That's a humongous opportunity. I think the perception of these giants, Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent, is a lot better over in Asia.
Really?
Just because they're closer. They're more localized. They have teams. They have localized teams that are on the ground that understands what consumers want, what the local consumers want, so they can package a particular product that appeals to that demographic.
I guess that's partly the argument people make on when people hear Chinese market caps, particularly those that are listed here. It kind of blows their mind sometimes, but it's because people don't understand the scope of their market share opportunities.
Yeah.
Right?
Some of these companies, they're not just confined to China. Tencent with their games, like League of Legends, that's a global audience. PUBG, King of Honor is more. They have so many games with a global audience. Alibaba, e-commerce globally, it's not just China. So they're building out their international segment. But unfortunately, on financial media, you just think of them as Chinese China. China, they only talk about Chinese consumers, but they're a global company. Keep that in perspective.
I think over the course of the last hour, man, you changed a lot of people's opinion on that. Like you said, you like to educate and learn, and I think a lot of people learned. And hopefully you, as our audience and Felix's audience, and engage with him on Twitter and give him your opinion, and particularly if you're in these other. We have a very diverse global audience of subscribers, Felix. So I've always been quite excited about this launch and you getting it out there to the people. And I think on the first go at it, they're pretty happy, and they got to know about your bird too.
Awesome.
So
I'll try to bring my bird. That's someday in the studio for everyone to see. As long as he doesn't screech, because it's really annoying to hear.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. He's Felix Wang. Remember, it's Felix Wang.